Oh boy, this movie really got to me. K-Dog's movie review. I Saw the TV Glow is directed by Jane Schoenbrunn and stars Justice Smith and Bridget Lundy Payne. Two teenagers bond over their love of a supernatural TV show, but it is mysteriously canceled. Before I saw this movie, this one was barely on my radar. I hadn't seen any promotional material for it at all whatsoever. I just happened to be looking on my movie app to see what was out this week. It was a horror that I had never heard of. So quickly Googled and discovered that it was an A24 film that actually came out a few months ago, I think, at a festival. And in my quick Googling, I had watched a couple of interviews with the director who has heavily implied, or honestly just straight out said, that this movie has a lot of trans allegory in it. And while I absolutely saw a lot of that within this movie and can totally see how someone could interpret it that way, I actually had a completely different connection with this movie. And I think that's what's so great about it. When a movie can stop and make you think, all the while being entertaining and leave itself to be interpreted in a number of different ways, I think that is just so great. I went into this movie with the mindset of what the director had talked about, but came out loving it for my own interpretation. It's almost like viewing a piece of art. Everyone is looking at the same canvas, but they take something different from it. And again, I think that's what is so beautiful about this movie because not only does it deliver a message that can resonate with different types of audiences who have had their own experiences, it does this while also being a beautifully crafted movie. The visuals here are absolutely stunning. I loved the use of color in this movie. The sound design is also on point, or maybe I should say lack thereof. The characters are great, the acting is superb, but like viewing art in a museum, this movie definitely isn't going to be for everyone. This isn't your typical popcorn horror movie. There are definitely horror elements to it and horrific imagery, but I'd almost label it as a dark drama. I will say it must have been hard to market this film. I didn't see any of the original trailers. I assume they're very non representative of what this movie is because this is a slow movie that really takes its time. Characters are often just staring at each other or taking a long time to respond to one another. Again, there's a lot of emphasis on visual storytelling within this movie. Things are not explicitly told to us. And in the end, I think there are going to be a lot of people who search YouTube or online forums for answers as to what certain scenes meant. I have my own opinions on them and I'll share them in the spoiler section, but I encourage anybody who watches this movie to really think about what they're feeling when they watch this because as I said before, there's a lot of different interpretation that can be had here. So as I said before, these two teenagers, I believe they're in 7th and ninth grade, they form a, I'll say bond. I wouldn't necessarily say friendship, but they form a bond over their love of this mid 90s, because this takes place in 1996, this mid 90s supernatural television show called The Pink Opaque. It's very similar to maybe Buffy the Vampire Slayer or Goosebumps, Are You Afraid of the Dark, shows from that time period. The overall aesthetic of this is great. The set design is amazing. What I love about this movie is it's great at being realistic while at the same time artsy and just almost dreamlike. A lot of the shots are pretty basic, but the use of color to really enhance them is fantastic here. It is more of a slower burn, but I never found myself bored. The pacing is pretty good. As I said, we start off the movie with our characters as kids in high school, and I think the characters and their interactions in this movie are so great. It feels real and raw. The way that two preteens or teenagers can sort of walk up to each other and have this slow, really awkward dialogue with some of that teenage angst thrown into there. It's so great. You know, in some movies that are centered around teenagers, you can almost feel the 45-year-old writer behind their dialogue. But here it feels more real and authentic. When a character asks a question to someone else, there aren't clear answers given. People are sometimes just silent in their response. It's this weird twist of being beautiful and awkward at the same time. I love the dialogue in this movie and I love the character interactions. I am going to bring up my main negative for this movie right now because it has to do with the characters. As I said, they start the movie with our characters being in 7th and 9th grade, and they actually start those early high school years with a different child actor playing the character Owen, who is later played by Justice Smith. My negative here is that the child actor does a fantastic job as a 7th grader. Great job all around. But then it just skips 2 years later and they swap out actors for Justice Smith, which kind of took me out of it a little bit. Not based on his performance. He does a great job as well, but he's 28 years old and he's playing a 14-year-old kid who's kind of shy and awkward. It just, I don't know, something about it kind of just, it felt off. Like it was well done, but I don't know. I was just staring at him saying, why couldn't we just use the child actor for this year as well? Besides that, I think everything is well done here. The Pink Opaque, the show that they are obsessed with, we show a lot of this TV series in this movie. It cuts away to it quite a lot. And a lot of the imagery from it feels really authentic for that time period. I feel very nostalgic for those types of shows. Every fall, I go back on Netflix or wherever it is, and I watch episodes of Goosebumps just because it gives me that good feeling. And here, the Pink Opaque, when they're children watching it, feels like what it felt like to watch those shows during that time, if that makes sense. When you look at them through the lens of an adult, which this movie even gets into, the perception of those shows changes. But when you're a kid, the view of these images in these shows is very twisted and it's a lot scarier and more off-putting. And I think this movie does a fantastic job of putting us in the lens of, you know, preteens or teenagers watching a show like this and the feelings that can erupt from it. And the only other thing I'll say before getting into spoilers, I absolutely loved the ending of this movie. It connected to me on such a personal level. I was fucking enthralled by it. Now, I will say this is where some of the horror aspect comes to it because I felt the ending to be almost panic attack inducing. From a movie making standpoint, it was beautiful. It's an odd feeling because it was beautifully tragic watching the ending of this movie. It really resonated with me, and I'm still thinking about it even today. I saw the movie a few days ago. Again, like with all movies, if you know what you're getting into, more of a artsy, slow burn, not everything is given to you kind of film, I would absolutely recommend this movie. A lot of the shots here are beautiful. I'm hopeful to buy this on 4K Blu-ray if it ever comes out. The character interactions are great and feel authentic in this dreamlike scenario that they're involved in. And ultimately, it left an impact on me and has me thinking about it, which I think is what many films these days try to achieve but fail to do so. Spoiler section, you've been warned. So, as I said, I think this movie and specific scenes in it can be interpreted in a lot of different ways. So, the basic plot is that our two main characters, Owen and Maddie, bond over the Pink Opaque, this nostalgic TV show. At one point, Maddie reveals to Owen that they want to leave this town. There's nothing for them there. They just want to escape. And once the Pink Opaque, after its 5th season, I believe, is unexpectedly canceled, Maddie leaves. Owen continues to live a relatively secluded life. He has a job where he doesn't really connect to his coworkers or seemingly any other people in life in general. He still lives at home in his mid to late 20s. He basically continues to live in the same house until his parents pass away. Until one day, Maddie returns and tells Owen about a lot of the struggles they faced while out on their own, how they never felt truly fulfilled or satisfied with their current position. That is, until they had their awakening, so to speak, in which she fully believed that she was in the Pink Opaque, or that she needed to go back to the Pink Opaque because she was actually one of the main characters looking in on what they thought was real life. And so, similar to the Pink Opaque show, they both needed to bury themselves alive and be reborn as these characters. Owen basically freaks out, says, Maddie, that's crazy. You've been missing for all this time. We need to tell the police. People think you're dead. And ultimately decides to stay home afraid instead of trying to enter that other world like Maddie. And Maddie is never seen again while Owen continues to live his life into his old age. Now, I think this is where a lot of where I said this is an artsy film comes in. You can't take the things that actually happen as real because the events don't necessarily make sense. You have to take them as metaphors or symbolism behind what's really happening. And while I can definitely see a lot of the trans allegory here, as the director mentioned, I myself interpreted it a different way. I connected to these characters who invested their entire lives into this comfort zone in the place of this show. It's where they felt most at ease and connected and happy, essentially. Everything outside of it felt fake and non-fulfilling. And years later, when Maddie tells Owen that he basically needs to make this giant leap of faith and go back into that comfort zone, he freaks out and is unable to do so. And so instead lives this life in which he is disconnected from the world and not truly fulfilled. While I can definitely see a lot of different interpretations from that, I myself, and I think many others, can relate to that feeling of wanting to go back to your comfort place or not making that decision to truly step outside of yourself and become where you find yourself most happy. So instead, we live these sort of secluded lives until one day you wake up and you realize you're an adult, you're much older now, and you've been living essentially in this fake body, in this fake world. The connections aren't 100% relatable to everything that happens in the movie, but I just found myself thinking about that a lot, and it's something that I truly connected with on a personal level. The two scenes in particular I want to talk about, the first being the shower scene with Owen. I believe it's after he watches the final episode of The Pink Opaque. His stepfather walks in on him, basically throwing himself into the show. What we're shown is Owen's face literally planted within the TV while it's sparking everywhere. Owen's stepfather basically rips him from that place and throws him into a hot shower while he screams about the Pink Opaque. I thought the scene was so raw and horrific and can really connect to a lot of people who feel as if they can't really express themselves to their family, friends, or loved ones, or just the outside world, and are basically thrown back into submission. Owen's stepfather basically playing the authority figure in his life, cleansing him with this hot shower of these impure thoughts or lifestyles that he wants to live. He feels most comfortable and happy throwing himself literally into the TV, into the Pink Opaque, but authority won't let him. And as such, he continues to live his life as a quote unquote regular person. He talks about how he has a family now and everything is good. Meanwhile, he's not smiling at all. His face is almost frowning and he looks sad and depressed and almost feels void of any soul. Until ultimately we're thrown into the end of the movie over 20 years later. He's an older man working at the same job. It's similar to a Chuck E. Cheese as the ball pit guy. And my favorite fucking scene of the movie, during a kid's birthday party when they're all supposed to be cheering and wishing him happy birthday, Owen just looks around at the crowd, looks in on himself, and starts screaming out of pure terror. He screams for his mother. He screams that he needs to get out of this real world and for someone to wake him up. This realization that life has passed you by and you're still not the person that you want to be was just horrifyingly sad to witness. But it was done in such an effective way. I found it, like I said, beautifully sad. We find Owen after that moment. in the bathroom by himself with a box cutter, and he literally opens up his chest and sees that there's still that inner TV show within him. And while he starts to really open up and let that TV show out, he starts to smile, but then suddenly stops and zips up his chest and puts back on his work attire, literally closing off that life and going back to the mundane job that he has. He steps outside the bathroom and is subtly apologizing for the way that he acted, apologizing for that inner turmoil. I also thought this was incredibly well done, with him just subtly wincing and apologizing to everyone while nobody was really paying attention. He was just wrapped up in his own psyche and felt shamed or embarrassed at the thought of him actually bursting out and being happy. And I think that's something a lot of us can connect to, no matter what our backgrounds are, wanting to be that true inner self, but just scared to open up to the world, because it really is a leap of faith. Maddie earlier in the movie tells Owen that he basically needs to be buried alive and have faith that everything is going to be okay after it, but he's too afraid to ultimately take that leap. I also wanted to mention the scene where Owen goes back and watches the Pink Opaque years later on a streaming service and finds out that it's basically a little kid's show. Things are way less scary and mature than what he originally saw. And I think that's something a lot of us can connect to. I said earlier that I still watch Goosebumps every year. As a kid, things in that legitimately freaked me out. But watching it today, I could see the corniness behind it. I still find a lot of comfort from it, and so we'll still watch it. But I can certainly see how the lens of nostalgia can really warp your mind into thinking that something was the greatest show or movie of all time. But where I think my opinion differs from Owen's in the movie was that he felt ashamed that he thought the Pink Opaque was so great. He felt secondhand embarrassment just from watching it as an adult. I think it's perfectly acceptable for any of us to say, fuck yeah, I loved Power Rangers when I was 10. I thought that was badass. Would I have the same opinions if I saw it for the first time right now? Probably not. But I can't deny the fact that when I was 10, I loved it and it brought me so much joy. And that even watching those movies today, for as corny and weird as I see them now, they still bring me that joy because of that comfort. Because they're out in theaters now, I think a lot of the Star Wars prequels. I adored The Phantom Menace when it came out. I think I was 6 when it came out. Now, I watch it through a different lens, but I still get a lot of those same nostalgic feelings from it. I can objectively say, yeah, it's a pretty shit movie, but it still brings me joy, the same joy that I experienced when I was a kid. And it's okay that those objective opinions are going to change, even if the raw emotions that they give you are the same. I don't know. I might be talking in circles about this. This movie has really made me think a lot about the role that nostalgia plays in our lives and our ability to really step outside of our comfort zone and become who we really want to become. As I said, those are just my interpretations of what occurred. But what I'd really like you guys to do is to let me know, what did you guys think of those scenes? What were your favorite moments in this movie? What does this movie truly mean to you? Because while the director can certainly have a vision about where it's supposed to go, and I can certainly see the beauty in that vision, I had my own and was able to draw parallels to my own life within it. Till next time.